Hello, and welcome as we continue with these mini Bible studies. This week, looking ahead and journeying toward the seventh Sunday of Easter, May the 16th, 2021. Today, I would like to read for you the Psalm for Sunday, which is Psalm number 1, and share with you some reflections that I've gathered for today. Happy are they who have not walked in the counsel of the wicked, or lingered in the way of sinners, nor sat in the seats of the sorrowful. Their delight is in the law of the Lord, and they meditate on God's teachings day and night. They are like trees planted by streams of water, bearing fruit in due season, with leaves that do not wither. Everything they do shall prosper. It is not so with the wicked. They are like chaff which the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked shall not stand upright when judgment comes, nor the sinner in the counsel of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall be destroyed. Here ends the psalm. Thanks be to God. Obviously, Psalm number 1 is the first psalm in the book of Psalms. And it also has a connection to the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, which are commonly known as the Torah, which can certainly be translated as the law, although it may more also accurately be translated as the instruction or the guidance. In our more modern society, we take exception to the idea of the law, even though verse 2 states quite plainly that a believer's delight is in the law of the Lord. Let us honestly ask ourselves, do we delight in the law of the Lord? Even if we substitute some less offensive words, do we delight in the instructions of the Lord, or do we delight in the guidance of the Lord? Delight seems like too strong of a word to me. Perhaps it would be more honest for some of us to admit that we often reluctantly adhere to the law of the Lord. Sometimes it seems to me God instructs us or God guides us onto paths which we are not delighted to follow. Bear with me a little bit here. One extreme example may be when Jesus instructed us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. And frankly, even when Jesus instructed us to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, we might be like that lawyer in the biblical story who asks, well, just who is my neighbor? Well, who do you mean by that? Psalm number 1 appears to set an either or kind of tone. Either we fall into the category of those who delight in the law of the Lord, verses 1 through 3, or we fall into the category of those who are considered wicked, verses 4 through 6. Now, who among us can honestly say that we always follow the rules or always obey God's commands? I would humbly submit that anyone who answers that they always obey God's commands, they might want to re-examine certain times in their lives. Not judging, just an observation. There are lots of times in life when I find this either-or mentality to be questionable, especially when the options are so absolute. Either you are completely on one side or you are completely on the other side. Many times I ask, well, why can't both sides have valid points? Rather than either or, why not both and? Such is the case for me in today's psalm, where it seems like people fall either on the good side or on the wicked side. Maybe it is simply my Lutheran instruction coming out, although Martin Luther taught that we are at the same time saint and sinner. Maybe we can understand this psalm to be saying that the instruction of God allows us to move forward, to develop, to grow in life and obedience. The good way is not devoid of problems, anxieties, heartaches. It does not mean that we will never sin again, although that might be a good thing. It may be better, in my humble opinion, to consider this as a relationship with God that grants us the freedom to evolve as human beings. The Hebrew word translated in verse 2 as meditate, that might cause us to misunderstand what it's trying to say, because we think of meditation as sitting in silent contemplation. There's nothing wrong with that kind of meditation for a time, although I do not know anyone who does it all the time, day and night, 24/7, 365. The Hebrew word that we translate as meditate carries with it a sense of plotting, moaning, speaking. There's almost a sense of a struggle in the context, and that makes more sense to me, as I often find myself in a sense of struggle between what God or Jesus instructs me to do and what my inner ego instructs me to do. For example, again, who among us would not struggle with the instruction to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us? Translating this Hebrew word as different from this silent contemplation, it invites us to read, to question, to discuss, to engage in the text in ways that impact our current daily living. Meditation then becomes active participation in a world in ways that demonstrate God's presence in the world. My humble opinion, again, this leads us also to a better understanding of how God's instructions, how God's laws are like water that refresh and nourish us. Conversely, the psalm says those who do not meditate on God's instructions are like chaff that is blown away by the wind. I'm going to guess that most of us did not grow up working in agriculture. And none of us ever worked on a threshing floor as described in today's psalm, at least. A simple understanding of the threshing floor described in today's psalm, it was a place where wheat harvesters would separate the wheat from the chaff. The harvester would beat the grain against the ground with a pitchfork, and then they would take the pitchfork and throw it up in the air into the wind, where the wind would blow the lighter chaff away and the heavier grain would fall back to the ground. Now, reacting to that metaphor in a literal sense may cause us to not want to be beaten against the ground and then thrown into the wind. Who wants that? Yet, when we consider it as a process of going through the struggle of meditation, as described in verse 2, and we see that doing the work to read and question, to discuss, to engage the text in our daily life, that is what keeps us from being blown away by the winds that would distract us from God's instructions. In today's psalm, the author establishes the wicked as those who are without substance, without the weightiness of the grain. They are the people from whom the primary good group should be separated. I know. There will be those who will think that this is an unfair generalization about non-believers, although that would be a misunderstanding. This psalm would have been directed toward the people of Israel, in other words, believers, and calling out those who are literally wicked. There are people in this world who are literally wicked. I think every single one of us can think of someone who is literally a wicked person, maybe even more than one. I'm not talking about merely sinful, we all fall into that category. But think about the most wicked person you at least know about if you don't know them personally. And answer honestly, at least to yourself, is that wicked person someone with whom you hang around or would want to hang around? Is that wicked person someone with whom you would enjoy spending time or do enjoy spending time? Why or why not? The psalm is saying that we should separate ourselves from the literally wicked, like the chaff is separated from the wheat. Now bear with me. This concept in the psalm is not an invitation for us to condemn or to judge others. Thankfully, we can still let God be God on that point. And I, for one, I'm grateful I don't have to fall into that trap. Rather, the main point of this psalm is an invitation to align ourselves with God's instructions and thereby discover the path of righteousness as we read and question and discuss and engage in God's instructions, God's word, and how that has an impact on our current daily living. This is one that we may struggle with for a while, and I encourage that. That's part of meditation, struggling through God's word. I hope you're having a good day today as we continue our journey toward the 7th Sunday of Easter, May the 16th, 2021. Take care. God bless.